All right, now we are recording. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Tarot Readers Academy Tarot Jam for February. It's February, right? February 2018. I hope all of you wonderful people are doing fabulously. So we have a few questions that have been sent in, and I want to make sure we cover those as well. And I've got some questions on my email. So how is everyone? Has anyone had any new and exciting tarot news since the last time I saw you all? This is where the crickets. Just quietness. Oh, well, that's obviously very sad about your mum, but lovely that you got a new deck. But, I mean, I know a lot of what's going on with Season's situation there, so it's a tough one. Oh, that's cool that you both got one. Okay. Alrighty, so our first question comes from, I got the Spirit Song one too, Joanne. I just unboxed it actually. Okay. So Nancy, who, sorry guys, Nancy, who is unable to make it tonight because she is with her mum in hospital, has asked, do any of my fellow readers always create a spread for their clients, or do you have a few tried and true spreads that you use over and over again? So for me, I have a few spreads that I do use that I know very well. Most of them are ones that I've made myself, and I do use them over and over again. I use them for my client readings for sure. And then I gotta say about 99, high 90s percent of the time I create a custom spread for my client, and I look at their situation and what outcomes they're looking for, and then anything else that I've been drawn to design for them that Spirit has guided me to create. So one of the first things I do before I jump on a reading or I start to record a reading or write a reading for my clients, this is before I even shuffle the deck, is design their spread so that I know which way I'm going. It's like my little map. So I make sure I've got the navigation down before I start going. Joshua has said, it depends on how much time in advance I have to prep, but I have a number of fallback spreads. It's a really good point. If you're doing readings from home or pre-records or like recorded ones or email readings, etc., then you've got a lot more time to prepare. Whereas if you are working face-to-face, so you're doing readings off the fly or that kind of thing, then you don't really have that time to prepare. So it's a very good idea to have a number of fallback spreads that you know very well and that you can make work for you. And I highly recommend that you work with a couple of spreads that can work in a lot of different situations that are going to be really versatile, and have those in your back pocket and practice those quite well as well. Season has commented saying, it depends on the question. I have some go-tos, but I also make spreads for unique questions and situations, and intuition leads that one. Here. Joshua, for a walk-in reading, I don't have time to design a spread, but like for an online scheduled reading, I do a custom one, yeah. And even for me with with Skype readings, I don't have any prep time. I don't ask them to send anything through, but so I don't do any extra prep for that. We work on the reading, like what's going on in the day. I ask my clients to write some questions down so we don't forget anything, but that's more like a live reading where we kind of go with the flow, and I may bring out some ones that I know from my repertoire in order to help my client. So that is how I usually do that. Was there anyone else that wanted to pop in? No? Okay, so let me just get to the next question. Oh, shucks. You're too sweet. Okay. And then Nancy has asked a second question saying, I would also like to know when you are doing an email reading, how long is it? Now, I know it will depend on the spread and the question, but on average, is it 1 pages or 2 pages, etc.? So that is a very good question. When I started to want to move my work online, and for those of you who have yet to meet me or don't know very much about me, I read tarot face to face for more than half my life. And when I moved to North America and then I got pregnant, I had to move all my clients' base online because they're all in Australia, and bitch, I ain't getting on a plane to read people's cards because it wouldn't even cover the plane ride. So I moved everything online while I was pregnant and did a lot of work shifting my work online. And I was kind of looking at, what other people were doing in regards to what the industry standard was. And that we don't have an industry standard. We don't have like a bar or a managing group of people. I don't really feel like we should have one. But but what you can do is have a look at like what other people are doing and sort of see what like the median road is and kind of like what you feel comfortable is with your skill level and how you feel is what is enough for you. So, and what I mean by that is like you have to feel good about the work that you put out in the world, and especially if you're going to be working as a reader and you're going to have yourself as the brand, you want to deliver a reading where you can go, yeah, I stand behind that work. So I did some research, and a lot of people do things like however many word reading or for an email, and I totally respect that. That's fine. I got I had a reading with someone who had that kind of set up, and this person is no longer I haven't seen them for a very long time in the community, and it was so much filler. Like it was like a 500 word reading for whatever it was, and it was just so much filler language, like it wasn't like to the point, it wasn't kind of getting, you know what I mean, like it just wasn't getting to the fucking point. It was like you could have just told me that in a lot less wording with a lot of this like bunny filler, and so that can be something that happens when you feel as though it's like when you're at high school or at university or college. Yes, Joshua was on my wavelength. It's like you have to write like your essay and it's got to be this long. And it feels a little bit like that. Not everyone. Some people are really, really good at like just completely channeling that much information. But sometimes, like for me, when I have a reading, sometimes I just get like such a fucking blunt, like, nope. And of course I'm going to give someone more than nope, but like you don't need to write War and Peace and then be like, and by the way, no. So I find that it's a bit of a difficult thing to, or not a difficult thing, but a personal preference that you first have to kind of figure out. I don't do a word count on my readings. I just don't. I find that my video readings would, if you did video, like if you part up my video readings next to my email readings, the video readings would have more of a word count because I can just talk. I can just like waffle on. Whereas because it's more, I guess it's more like channeled from a space where I don't have to stop. Whereas with writing, you know, it's got to go through the brains a little bit more. So yeah, for me, I don't do a word count kind of thing. I just do it until I feel the message is done. And when I'm doing email readings, I will definitely look at more of a tarot spread. So at least I'm giving myself that parameter. And I do a lot of tarot spreads on my video recorded readings, but sometimes I just kind of like do more of like in a flow one and just go from there as well. So anyway, those are the things that I do. If anybody else wants to comment on that, go straight away. Or is it just going to be me dancing today? No, it's going to just be me. So a bit of a show of hands then. I'm going to put you bastards on the spot. How many of you actually read for other people here? We've got a number of people who are on the call. For those of you watching the replay, it ain't just myself talking to myself up in this. It is other people on this call. I'm just going to see how many people are like students or people who actually read for other people. I know quite a few people's faces on here. Still learning. Raise his hand. Just started to learn tarot. Okay, fair enough. I put you on the spot. I won't put the people who've just starting to learn on the spot. That'd be mean. Still learning occasionally. Okay, cool, fair enough. Fair enough. I do some readings. I did it professionally a few years ago, learning now in a way I'm happy with. Right on. That's what you want. Yeah, there's no Renee, I'm about to launch my business in May or summer. Yeah, you go, girl. That's awesome. I'm not going to put anyone on the spot. I'm certainly not built that way. I don't think that's really very helpful anyway. I'm just more being silly. Josh, I had like 3 coffees today, boo. I had so much caffeine. My kid is sick. I had to go pick him up and he's not well and he's like crying and he's going with his dad tonight and it's just like it's been a hot mess of a day. So I feel you. Let me just put it that way. I feel you. Cool. Dabbling for 20 years. Ugh, gross. Not you, Katie. I was talking about Joshua's comments. Alrighty. You're not gross, Katie. I don't call you gross. My God. Rude. That would be like the rudest person. I'd be the rudest person ever. Alrighty. So let's go back to our questions. And remember, you can also ask if you have any questions during the jam. Just throw them up on the chat and give me something to waffle on about. Give this Gemini something to chat about. Right, back to my tarot questions. Alrighty. Oh, here's a good question. This is from Amy. What cards in a tarot deck are related to health or may indicate a specific health problem? Are there any combinations that go together that anyone can suggest? Good one. Now, for me, health stuff, I think health is one of those things that you have to decide how you're going to read. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. And Joshua's just mirroring. We need to get out of each other's head. Joshua's like saying exactly what I would say. Try to let the doctors do the health stuff. Totally. But there is like minor things that have come up for me before in readings for people, like pain or pressure. Like I've had people who suffer from migraines. I've gotten pressure around the temples, or I've had pressure around the band around my head. Back pain, knee pain, like joint pain in certain areas that is not my own. I've the 10 of Wands in a very specific placement can mean back injury. Like in a lot of the times in the Rider-Waite-Smith, the person is hunched over and they've got all these rods on their back, and it's like, you've got to be careful because you could hurt your back. So that can come up, especially if and what I mean by in a very specific position. So say, for example, I know my client is moving, or I know they're going to be moving a house, and in the what they don't know position, the 10 of Wands comes up and I get a hit that it has to do with their body. Then I'll be like, okay, don't be cheap. Go hire some removalists to move the heavy stuff, because if you don't, you're going to end up on your back, for the next however many long kind of things. I've had the 10 of Swords also be acupuncture, with all the swords in the body. That's come up quite a number of times for acupuncture. So that's another one that comes up for me. But oftentimes it is my clairs kicking in to tell me if it's a health thing. Josh was saying, if I see a health issue, it's usually in a context. The 10 of Wands regarding overwork or stress. 3 Wands for surgery. 3 of Swords, for surgery. 4 of Pentacles for bowel issues. Actually, no joke. That's a good one. Yeah, I can see that. 3 of Swords for surgery. I've also had that for root canals and stuff. Because no one likes a dentist. Sorry if anyone's a dentist here, but your job is literally the worst. Sorry. Hate to break it to you. No one likes going to you. So I've had that happen. I've had that happen, come up quite a bit for dentistry work, but a lot of the time it's it's the clairs that come in for me for so 5 of Pentacles I've had come up as the flu, a bad flu. Someone's gotten sick from being sick. But as far as medical stuff, I don't do diagnosis. I don't nope. I'm not a doctor. Go see a doctor if you think you're really sick. Renee is saying I get a headache or nausea combined with Swords card usually. The Devil in conjunction with bad health habits, but yeah, health is a big boundary. James, if I will share if Spirit tells me if they need to see someone, then I'll have them tell it's a choice they have to. I'll even go as far as making appointments and going with folks. Now that is some dedication. So yeah, of course I've had readings where it's been you need to go see a professional, and that for me has come up a number of times across the board. You need to go see a healthcare professional, you need to go see a counselor or someone who can help you give you the right tools, because I'm not a certified psychologist. I've had, you need to go see a fucking lawyer, you need to call the police, you need to go speak to someone about, what your rights are as someone who rents. It's not just about a health professional. I think something that is a really important thing for all tarot readers to know is where is my boundary, and where do I need to, where is my responsibility to say, you need to go see someone else.
So I have something. So one of the things one of the things that I do is, and because most of the people I work for are or read for are in the counseling or medical field and stuff. And like, you know, something comes up. I'm like, well, what would you tell a family member to do? What would you tell, you know, the client to do? You know, turn it back on them. Like, what, you know, take the advice that you would freely give out in your practice, take it upon yourself. Like if what you're feeling is something, if somebody reported that to you as, you know, I have this, I have that, I have this, and you would tell them, well, you should go see your family doctor, you should go see your specialist or whatever. If the same sort of things are happening for you, you've just answered your own question, right? I don't particularly myself have particular cards that I relate necessarily to illness. I mean, if it comes up in the question or like you said, something that you're just sort of feeling. But yeah, I'm much more of a person to throw it back and say, hey, you know, hey, I'm just here reading your cards. What, you know, if it were me, what would you tell me to do? Go to the doctor. Well, there you go. Like, sort of throw back the common sense thing.
Yeah, totally. That's a good way of doing it. And it's also in a more empowered way, right? Like to be like, okay, I'm going to be a mirror and I'm just going to be like, and here you go. Ball is back in your court. And so Susan has asked, what if someone is trying to decide between medical options? I say for like stuff like that, and this is just something that you may want to try. There is nothing wrong with reading your own cards with that, like seeing it against, like if you've had two doctors and you want to see which one is, you know, the right diagnosis or whatever it may be. You know, maybe go see another one or, you know, do it yourself so that what you're doing is you're waiting for that like intuitive hit of like which one is right. You know, and sometimes, oh my gosh, words. You know, oftentimes we know when we kind of get the answer. It's like that feeling that we get inside. But yeah, medical stuff is it's a tricky one. To be honest, I'm more comfortable talking about predicting future than I am about medical shit. I would much rather tell you what's going to happen about anything else than your medical stuff. Yeah. And then Renee says, I worked on the phone for a while, had a list including social worker programs, shelters, etc. Yeah, and that's a great to have a little you know, blue book of referrals for people, for sure. Yeah, totally. Okay, let's have a look. Susan had a question up here before. Okay, Susan asks, do you decide on one set of meanings and stick to it, or do you shift that a bit based on the deck and the reading? Does anyone else want to field this before I
do. I totally, like, I always have my standby, you know, base meanings for cards, like 3 of hearts is heartbreak and stuff like that, but the 3 of hearts, the 3 of swords. But it does for me really depend also on the deck. Just like there are decks, like I will occasionally read reversals or acknowledge a reversal, but there are some decks that I don't, because reversed, the card has nothing to say at all. It's all in the upright position. So I sort of let the cards before and after and around it, as well as the deck itself and my own gut, sort of intuitively tell me what that card. Sometimes the only thing I take out of a card is Pentacles is money, and that's the only thing I take out of that card, because it's dealing with something else that's happening, say, in that card or in that spread.
So for me, with tarot card meanings and various different layers, I only read upright, so I don't read reversals. I've never read reversals. I do feel as though you're going to get the answer if it's a shit one. Guess what? You're going to find out it's shit anyway. So, and that's, you know, whether it's in the position, in the question, in the cards surrounding it, in the relationship, in what's not in the reading can sometimes be like if it's an overflow of one thing. Like if you've got all swords, you're probably like you don't need to read reversals if you got all swords. So I don't read reversals, but I do have a base understanding of my cards. I feel like if you're going to do tarot and not oracle, or not be a clear intuitive reader, then you probably should work into having a very good understanding of the system, because it was designed as a system. It has meanings for a reason. Doesn't mean you can't be an intuitive reader or both, because I'm both, but I absolutely know the meaning of every single tarot card. And it also depends on what system you use. Like I've just started doing the Tarot Readers for Beginners series, and tomorrow's blog post is actually about the 4 mainstream systems within tarot, and they're going to have different things to say as well. So once you figure out which one you're working with, then getting a good understanding certainly helps, and they can bridge systems as well. So you can learn a little bit about, say you're all about Rider-Waite, and then you go to a deck that doesn't use that. You can still use a little bit of that information to transfer that over. But they all react. They're like a 20-sided fucking dice in role playing, right? There's so many different meanings and context and relationships and interactions and counter interactions, and you know what it means about, you know, love and relationships and work and career and spiritual and blah blah blah. So yes, I know about my cards, but I also know a number of the different variations of it. But I have had, for example, a reading where a card comes up and it's just like one thing in that card really draws my attention, and it may kind of counteract a little bit about what I know about it, but it's something that's coming in intuitively from my guides, or it's something that really needs to be said, and I do that too. So I guess for me it's about layers, and ogres have layers. So I use my layers, and yeah, but I think a good place to start is to definitely have a good idea about the base meanings.
Is it okay if I elaborate the question a little bit? Targety a little bit? Cool. I'm definitely not asking if we should know the meanings of the cards, because I'm taking your tarot certification course, so I would say my vote is definitely for knowing the cards well. So definitely that, but I guess I mean a little bit more of, I'm starting to have a bit of a collection, and I love the, you know, I guess expansiveness that these artists and authors approach tarot with. And I noticed that some decks that are really, really beautiful, you know, the book has very different meanings. And sometimes the art actually only works with that designated meaning that the author or the artist intended. And so, you know, I guess I've for the first time, because you know, I've said last time, I mean, for me, I started with tarot, but with reigning tarot, just like every kind, you know, from esoteric to Marseille to Rider-Waite Smith to Thoth or Tote, or however you want to say that. And I, to get through the certification, have definitely decided on one deck to just give myself continuity. But, you know, as a person that's starting to get a bit of a collection, I noticed that it can become challenging to really, I guess, to know, like, I don't know if it's an ethical question I'm asking or if it's a integrity, because it's probably an integrity question that I'm asking, of how do you decide with all of that information and all the different styles and everything. Do you have just a handful of decks that you always use for people that you have your pre-decided definitions with, or do you, like, I know some people give discounts and while they're learning a new deck and it's a whole new thing, and yeah, just how do you kind of keep continuity and integrity with your collection, I guess?
So for me, I tend to, I always have that base meaning that, because I was a Rider-Waite. Well, originally I started with the Mythic Tarot. Apparently I've forgotten everything about that deck. Still have it though. But I'm a Rider-Waite learner. That's what I learned on. It's what stuck. That being said, it's always there. It's always there. But my brain just stopped. The meaning or the way I explain the card or the message from the card that I'm getting to the client may not be the same one I use for that same card in the Rider-Waite deck, but the underlying meaning message is the same, but it might be slightly. Does that make sense? So like I'll read the Wildwood Tarot differently than I read my Rider-Waite deck, right? That doesn't mean that the Three of Swords doesn't necessarily have the same underlying meaning, but I might explain it very differently, right? That sort of thing. That's how I take it, and it. I also use decks based on the question, the person. I often let the client pick the deck. So I have a couple of decks that I'm working with, that I'm familiar with, that I'm comfortable with. And then based on the question, I'll say, okay, pick from these two decks, right? Or, okay, this is really the only deck that's appropriate for this type of work. So this is the one we're going to use. But I quite often have a couple of decks to let them sort of choose a deck that feels right for them, because they have to understand it just as, as they have to connect with it. Otherwise, they're going to stare at you blankly, like you're talking out of your ass, and have no connection to it. At least that's my experience.
Josh?
Yeah, so just wanted to jump in and say, in regards to that, I do I do very similar to what Michelle does, where I will offer clients different decks for that specific reason, just so that we can kind of get in their context. But as far as sticking to a set definition, that baseline foundation, it doesn't matter what the deck is, I'm going to use that. And when the deck is wildly different, that actually gives you another layer to work with. So you can choose to go strictly by what the artist and the creator's intention is, if that's how you feel you want to work. And I feel like if you're going to work that way, just be upfront and be with yourself and with a client and say, this is how I choose to work with this deck. I feel like I really want to honor the creator's intentions here. Or you can say, okay, you can kind of note it and be like, that's another layer to this. I'm still going to do things the way I'm taught, but I'm going to acknowledge it. And it's actually funny because was doing in my own work today. I'm just starting to work with the Prismavisions Tarot, and I just had a little bug over their Seven of Wands for a similar reason. And I had to remind myself, okay, what would you do with any other deck you work with? You would say, I've heard what you want to say about this. It's very different, but remember, you're still the Seven of Wands. The art change doesn't change that. We're talking about something that is a facet of this archetypical energy. It's not going to turn into something else because someone saw a different side of it that I didn't see. So, as far as working with that deck, I'm going to have to come to the conclusion as I work with it. Is this one where I really want to stick with the creator's intentions 100%? Or am I going to use that as just another element to it. And so when you have a large collection, I do find sometimes there are just decks where you're like, you might be too different for me. You have your own way of doing this, and I appreciate that, and you're very beautiful, and you're going to look great on the shelf, but I probably won't work with you a lot because it's too different for me to rectify what I'm seeing in you and what I know about you. And I just don't have that shared perspective. So that one goes on the shelf. It looks beautiful. If someone needs it, hey, I've got a copy of it. But as far as ones I do work with, and I do have a set number that I tend to keep in rotation. I kind of call them my Pokemon, to be really dorky. I have my team, and so we let different people pick them and, whatever they resonate with. And just like Michelle says, sometimes you're like, listen, you're gunning for the Thoth. I just don't feel that that's right for you. Or, they want to draw an Oracle card before the start of the session and they go right for the Angelarium. And I'm like, okay, wait. Let's just stop and talk about this deck just a second so you're aware of what we're getting into. And then if you really still are drawn to it, we'll do that. But as far as trying to honor every single deck that you have, you can still honor them and work with them how you want to work with them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have to come up with a personal working system for every single deck you collect.
Thank you so much, Josh. Or Joshua. Sorry, I don't want to call you a nickname. That was so succinct and clear, and just exactly what feels like has been forming for me. But being still a student who's also a reader is a little bit tricky because I'm not a total beginner, but I'm also not a master either. And so I think my confidence just gets a little shaky. And just when I hear, what Michelle and what you both said, just it all makes so much sense in terms of what seems to be forming. And so thank you so much for that, you guys.
James had his hand up before. Did you want to say something, or did you type it? Michelle, did you want to go while we wait to hear from James?
I just wanted to add on to that, because that's totally, I get what Josh was saying. I totally get that. There are also decks that I don't use for anybody but me. I mean, I bought the Dreams of Gaia deck because I thought, it's beautiful. And then I got it and I'm like, I did one of the spreads that was in the book. And I've even talked to Anthony about this. The spread, not only did it kick me in the face, it kicked me in the ass, in the gut. It beat the crap out of me, this one spread. And I'm like, okay, you know what? You're too deep. You're too brutal. I'm the only one that I can only use this for me right now, because this is obviously the deck that's going to go, hey, screw you. Stop lying to yourself. Listen to what I'm telling you. So, you don't have to use every deck for all your clients. And you don't, I can hear your echo, Anthony. and I'm already loud, so it's kind of funny. I think especially when you're learning, in my experience in classes and stuff, using the same deck through the course gives you that confidence in those meetings that when you do pick up a totally different deck that looks very different, and you're like, well, it says magician, let's go with it, and then work at it from there. That you feel a little more confident picking up that Thoth deck if you've been using a Rider-Waite deck and you've got that keyword that goes, okay, and then, all right, so we're manifesting, okay, and then go from there and work with it, right? Thanks.
So, hello and good evening, everyone. I just wanted to share, I think the most important thing to remember is that we always refer to ourselves as readers, but I think what we are is storytellers. And we're using spirit and utilizing spirit and what spirit tells us to tell the story through the cards. And whatever you're going to base your theory of your card system on, whatever deck you decide to base it on, is going to be the core of who you are, that you're going to choose to share that base information with the others. And I look at cards as being sort of friends. Different decks are the different friends you meet along the path in life's journey, right? And we have more people that we more resonate with and other people that we don't resonate with so much. But when we see them, we really, really enjoy the time that we're with them. And it's fantastic, but we don't have to be with them all the time. but there are those people that we spend a lot of time with. And I think when you're working through decks, you have to realize that whatever the message is that comes with that deck that the artist intended, look at that, bring that message along with you. But then at the same time, if your core value is that which you learned and that which you believe in self, you need to sort of share that out, because you are who you are with all of those people you meet along the life journey, right? You just modify your energy to help balance and vibrate better with them, so that you're not offensive to them, but that in place you are just resonating with them. Because as we're transferring spirit, resonance is what we are supposed to be. And we're just the messenger. That's all we are. We're the vessel to deliver the message.
Thank you for sharing, James. I appreciate you jumping in and adding your perspective. Above everything that's been said about the subject, the tarot or any spiritual tool, if you choose to believe it is a spiritual tool, is just that, it's a tool. You can pick up any tool, and what you do with it is completely up to you. So while I would classify my decks as friends too, don't get me wrong, totally do. But they are also spiritual tools of mine. They are on my altar, just like my athame, just like my wand, my everything else on my altar. They are a part of a tool system. So you can choose to use them however you want. You can choose to completely it's got nothing to do with the dishonoring an artist or a creator, and take it from someone who is a creator, right? Like, I just put the work out in the world. What the fuck you choose to do with it is completely up to you. Art is exactly the same. We can look at the same painting and you can be like crying in a corner, fucking like moved to shit about it, and I can be sitting there going, well, that's a piece of crap. So you don't feel as though you're dishonoring any artist or any creator, because if they're a true artist or creator, they know that their art is going to be seen by so many eyes in so many different ways. The only thing that you really need to do is to honor yourself through that art, right? And honor your client through that art, and honor your client through that tool. And if you choose to do that with your baseline understanding of the tarot, boom, then you do it. If you choose to do it by ignoring what you know about it, and because you're really drawn to a specific way that queen is looking at that king, or that queen is looking at that card in that instant, in that moment, that's the message you're supposed to be saying. I have personal decks that I only use for myself. Daughters of the Moon Tarot is one. The Medicine Woman Tarot is another one. They have completely different systems, and I use them for myself, just like Michelle was saying in the Dreams of Gaia. I don't read for my clients with those decks because they take me outside of my preconceived ideas, and I need that for myself, because otherwise I'm like, oh, I know that the Four of Swords means, but it's great to work with another deck that really challenges my perception of the tarot, and that's why I work with a lot of different decks as well. But just remember that don't feel as though you have to honor anyone but your client and yourself. You've already fucking honored the artist by paying the deck. You've already honored that creator by choosing to, give your money, which is your energy and your time, to supporting their work. So I don't know. I don't really see it from that perspective, because art is so open and all that kind of stuff. So that's just my 2 cents about it anyway, beyond what everybody else said, because I totally agree with what everybody else said as well. Yeah. Well, and I know what you meant by maybe dishonoring wasn't the right word, but we don't get too wrapped up in maybe don't be too I mean, there are people who read with the Crowley deck, and Crowley's deck, and if anyone has worked with the Thoth, Crowley's deck has a vibe, right? That shit has got a vibration. It was designed to have a very specific vibration by a very intelligent occultist and a very intelligent artist. So that has a vibe, but there are plenty of people who've either made a deck based on the Thoth or read with the Thoth who have gone well and truly outside of that. So I guess that's what I was saying, and I know totally that you get what I'm saying, Joshua. So it's not, I know we're reading from the same page. We've been like on each other's wavelength all night. Oh my gosh, that was a great conversation we just had. So Antonio had a question. I'm just going back up. Antonio from Brazil. I'm still an absolute beginner. Welcome. Hopefully we haven't scared you off. 1 year as a tarot student, sometimes intuition flows like a river and suddenly I get stuck at one card. Then I start rambling on about topics the card is related. It's a bit frustrating, but I start poking at the seeker for clues. Do you have any suggestions? My suggestion is leave that card and come back to it later. If you are starting to feel as though you are rambling, sinking, flailing, struggling, just fucking leave it and come back. And what I found with that is often if I move on from there, it makes sense later. Like the other foot drops. I'm like, oh, that's why that's there. And then you can come back and like, it's not linear. Spirit doesn't work in lines. Spirit's like, what's a fucking line? That's some human shit you guys have like decided to do. So if you do get stuck, all joking aside, if you do get stuck, I suggest you leave it. And maybe just be aware of a few of the base energies about it and then come back to it later and don't feel as though you need to really. The other thing is as well is, and this also has something to do with the last conversation we were having, I would be very concerned about a client that comes to you and sits there and nitpicks everything that you say about every card. Like, I'm not the kind of reader who will be like, who tears apart like a reading. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say is if your message is on point, if your answer is correct, if your insight is resonating, if you're doing your job, then it shouldn't really matter if you kind of went, I don't know everything about this one card, oh shit. Maybe it's not important. Maybe everything else is more important. Does that make sense? Holy shit, I hope that made sense. Made sense to me. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
I think you made a really good point in saying, there's no governing body. And considering we're not any sort of structured academia, I guess I can't help it. I've had pretty, science-based education with being a health coach with a nutrition focus and everything for, independent researcher for 15 years and all that. And there's definitely a sort of status quo, I suppose, with that. Although with the shamanic training, it's not quite as finite, but there's still a status quo with that too, because there's a way and then there's a not way, an unway, with having a teacher, etc. But with tarot, it is so wide. And I think this, just for me, it's, I think James really nailed it. It's just a matter of needing to make sure that I'm on the right track and trying to figure out how do I tell if I'm on the right track. And maybe there is no right track. And if that's the case, then cool, I'll just do what I do. And, the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Joshua, do you want to go next? I just realized that I was muted. Ha ha ha! Loser.
Yeah, I'm just going to add there on that sticky card situation. Here's another thing too. And I'm not saying come in from like early, don't come in looking to really push buttons or anything. But sometimes if a card doesn't make sense, it can be a case where sometimes it's because energetically your seeker has kind of not told you everything. And so there's a context you're not aware of, and the cards are kind of trying to get them to further open up so you can kind of see that context. So you don't necessarily want to like push a lot of buttons there and be like, so what are you not telling me? Because that's not really your role, and that's no one likes that. But there are times where sometimes it's something that they may not be aware of or they just haven't told you. The card is still usually on point, but you don't have the full picture there to work with. And so, that can be a situation that comes up sometimes, and it's not going to happen every time you're stuck. Sometimes you're just stuck because you're stuck. But sometimes, I'll just share a little personally. I had a reading here last week where someone wasn't wanting to be real honest about the fact that they were cheating on a significant other, and it was in the cards. And I'm like, at one point I just had to stop and look at him and be like, so how long has baby mama still been in the picture? Because she's right here. And he's kind of like,
oh, Joshua's frozen. If he comes back, we'll put him back on. Michelle, he was getting to the juicy bit too.
Yeah, so to go back to the sticky card things, I really liked something that Joshua had written in a comment earlier when we were talking about the 20-sided die and how that card might just actually not necessarily have its own message, but be there to influence the card. Yeah, modifiers. The card before or after, above or below or whatever. Like it's there to shed a little extra light on those cards. I really liked that because I've had that where a card has come up and it makes no sense in the reading, it makes no sense to the client, and then when I took it and sort of fitted some of that energy to one of the other cards in the spread, it was like, oh, that makes sense. That all makes sense. Great. So it could be that as well. But yeah, no, I tend to put the cards out and then look at them before I start my reading, and sort of if something jumps out at me, point that out and then go through the reading. That way I sort of have a heads up as to sort of what's sort of laying there on the table, so that when I sort of all of a sudden get to that card, I'm like, I kind of have a preview. So that's what I do.
All right, Josh, let's try this again.
Okay, I'm not going to drag this out too much, but I guess the only thing I heard when I jumped back in was we got cut at the juicy part. But the point was, there was the high priestess sitting there, and it made no sense. I put a pin in it. We were like, okay, let's look at everything else and see, and then we'll come back to this because right now I don't fully understand what it's trying to tell me. We went through the rest of the spread, we talked it over, and it just said there was another woman, a younger woman, and this younger woman was being kept a secret. And I had to kind of be like, listen, I kind of need you to tell me a little bit more about this younger woman, this other woman that is impacting your life here. And he was a little defensive at first. I made him really clear, listen, it's a no judgment zone. You can trust me with this, but I can't help you break through this until you give me a little bit more information, because the cards already are trying to tell me. I just don't have the context. And then he was like, yeah, well, I've kind of been, he came clean about what was happening. And from there, we were able to come up with suddenly the rest of the spread had this whole other layer of context to it. And it was just a case where this sticky card for me, the approach was put a pin in it. Let's see what the rest of the cards say. And after you looked at the rest, if you still don't understand, it sometimes can just be that they're not being completely upfront about everything.
Thanks for finishing that story off, because it does show like a working example of what to do. Another thing too, Antonio, and I know I think it was either James or Joshua said in the comments about there is nothing wrong with asking the person you're doing a reading for feedback or for their input. I mean, there are very famous readers who do nothing but that. They do a collaborative read. Another thing that you can do is pull a clarifying card. So if you're really stuck, and especially if you're still learning, pull a clarifier. Say, okay, I'm a bit stuck. I need to pull another one to make it a little bit helpful, to help it. Like, what are you trying to tell me? Or pull another one. Try not to pull half the deck, because that's just going to confuse the shit out of you. But even if you just pull one extra card, it may help give you a little bit more context or a little bit more to go on. Yeah, that is the perfect time for a clarify. Thanks, Boo.
Those are my favorite conversations. It's like, so there seems to be a very young person new in your life. You're like just like slowly trying to drag out. Those are some of my favorite conversations with people. It's like, so is there somebody like a young male living in your house? You know, trying to get those things out. Those are fun.
I'm not usually all that diplomatic. I'm like, who's fucking cheating? Go on, out with it. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to say that if, like, depends if, like, say another person's going, I think my boyfriend's cheating on me. That's going to be a whole different conversation of whether it's like that person is the one perpetrating it. But yes, and that's the thing. I think there's a little bit of this is an art form. I really believe that this is an art form and something that, I mean, I take it very fucking seriously, my work. And my study and my continued education and my investment in my job and my business. But yeah, like learning, you know, when to say something and when not to say something, you know, like it's the same sort of thing that you would get at any job, you know, you're learning to hone your skills and to hone your bedside manner, and to know when it's appropriate to say something and when it's appropriate not to say something. So it's okay. You'll get there as long as you keep going, and you don't need to know everything all at once. Yeah, so I like Joshua. Honesty is the product, diplomacy is in the packing. That's right. Very true. Margot's asked, okay, one more question, then we're going to go because I've got my sick child to take care of. How have you dealt with? Whoa, chat's gone crazy. How have you dealt with people that return over and over and over with the same question, as in, is using this an addictive cycle that makes any sense? Cut them off. Cut them off. No more tarot for you. Out of here. Get out. See you later. I've refunded money to paying clients. I have said, nope. I've asked that question. You need to go away. You need to let things lie for a while. The answer's not going to change. I'm not taking your money. I am. And then honestly, if you feel as though that person is going to like just jump to like another reader or like jump to a hotline that's going to drain their credit card, first of all, you can't really do anything about that. Like we can't like literally go around at the door and just be like, I'm worried about you. But you can have a pretty honest conversation and just say like, think someone might have a bit of a problem, and be like, yeah, maybe we need to stop. And I have said, you know, Spirit wants you to fucking back off. Like, just back off. Just stop. You're getting the same answers. You're not going to get anything different no matter who you go to. But yeah, cut them off. That's the only thing I can. And I have, like I said, I have refunded money and not done readings and gone, bye-bye. So.
I had a reader tell me once after I had the same reading, it was 3 times in the same day at a fair, you got to do something about this or you're going to get the same answer. Like, shit or get off the pot, basically. You know, like I can only tell you the same thing over and over again so many times, because if you don't change something or don't do something or, you know, it's not a passive. You have to make the work. You have to do the work to get what you want, right? It's you can't just sit there and wait for it to show up. Because if it were that easy, damn, I would never leave the house. But yeah, I mean, I actually have to be hello. Like, how many times do you want Spirit to word this? Like, Spirit can only word this so many ways before I pick up, as it was so eloquently put, the beat stick and hit you with it. So it's yeah. You know, when you've made a change and you've noticed something different or have a different question, come back and see me. But otherwise, I'm not giving the same stuff.
Totally. So I think everyone pretty much said the same thing. A taser and a say no. A politely worded email saying fuck off. No. And then like some people are in pain. Like a lot of people, like I know I'm being like jokey because I've had a lot of caffeine today and it's getting late and I've been working all day and I've had a sick kid. But, you know, I do recognize that people are in genuine pain and distress when they come to tarot a lot of the time. I'm not disclosing, like I'm not discounting that. But yeah, I was just kind of having a bit of a joke. Hopefully that was very, very clear. All right, my love bunnies, I am out of here. I'm going to go collect my poor little boy and get him all snuggled up on the couch and ready for bed. So thank you so much for spending time. I will see you all at our next jam, and peanut butter. I hope you have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.